So I've been having this question. Why are most speech evaluations forgettable? If the whole goal is to make it stick with the audience, the speaker who gets the feedback, so they are able to remember this evaluation and they apply it in the next speech. Hi there, I am Dulaj Prabhasha, and for as long as I remember, I've been a scholar, unofficially, and a fan of the art of speech making. Now, the whole goal of this video is not to give you another framework to do speech evaluations. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of videos right here on YouTube to do just that. My goal is to give you a different lens to look at speech evaluations through the principles outlined in this book. Made to Stick by the authors Chip and Dan Heath is a clever little book that speaks about the very foundation of ideas. Why some ideas survive and others just die. They call this the stickiness of an idea. According to the authors, there's 6 key principles that make your message stick. These 6 principles are simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and stories, which you can fit into this handy little acronym, SUCCES. Let's explore each principle in detail and how we can reframe our speech evaluations with each one. Principle number 1. Simple. Can you strip things down to the core? An example the book gives is, she's a rocket scientist who looks like Jennifer Lawrence. Now, we don't know how old this person might be. We don't know what country she's from. We don't know where exactly she works, but it's enough information for us to get an idea, to paint a picture in our mind. What happens if you strip it down too much, though? If you say she's blonde and employed, that is not enough information for us to paint much in our minds, is it? In an evaluation, how we could phrase a point is, for example, in the speech you use contrast. On one hand you had the clock, and on the other you had your camera. This gave a sense of urgency to each moment in this speech. It made us wonder, how much of this moment could you capture before that moment passed you by? A bad way of saying the exact same thing would be, you used juxtaposition. On one hand you had your camera, and on the other hand you had time, which is the one thing a camera cannot capture. Because see, although that might sound cool, it's really hard to follow along with. It doesn't get to the core of the idea. Side note, the second example is how I actually did that evaluation. Lesson learned. Another way to keep things simple is generative analogies. When you explain something new, do so using familiar concepts. An example the book gives is how Disneyland calls their employees cast members. It tells them how to act. It tells them to act as if they are always on stage, even if they are sweeping the floor. A bad example of this is Subway calling their employees sandwich artists, although they're not supposed to get creative with those sandwiches. In an evaluation, this comes down to how we label the what's. What was done well? What could be improved? How do you label them in such a way that they don't confuse their meaning? As Da Vinci once said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Principle number 2, unexpected. This one is about getting attention and keeping it. How do we get attention? By breaking a thinking pattern. Can you find out what exactly is unexpected about your message? What's the real why of why you're saying this, instead of just the what of the idea? For example, we can say bananas contain potassium, which is radioactive. Factually correct. We can also say the power of a nuclear bomb can be measured in bananas. Now that can catch you off guard, can't it? How does this apply to our evaluations? See, in good speeches, it's easy for us as the audience to ignore any pain points. There was this contest I was in where the test speaker did a speech about their name and how it was being butchered by different people, which is a common theme in humorous speeches. Now, that speech did not have a real point to it, and only one evaluator commented on this in their recommendations, and that speaker, unsurprisingly, won the contest. Another way to make our content surprising is to make our messages hit closer to home. An example the book gives here in this instance is children hooked on new drug in town, a potential newspaper headline. And you can be like, okay, yeah, sure. But what if it was phrased like this? Children are abusing a new drug and it may be in your own medicine cabinet. And now you give your kid that stare, don't you? How can we make our evaluation hit closer to home? It's simple. We tie in the theme of the speech to our evaluation. In this recent contest I was in, the test speaker talked about mountains falling and friendship in his speech. And I made sure to sprinkle in those elements in my evaluation. My transition to the recommendation said, I don't have mountains for you. I concluded that evaluation by saying, I hope I made a friend. And throughout the entire duration, I could feel the audience glued to my evaluation. They were even laughing. See, because there's a dopamine hit when you can surprise your audience with the unexpected. I even had the test speaker come up to me after the contest and ask me, bro, how do you even do that? That is the power of surprise. Principle number 3, concrete. Are your ideas understandable or are they just words? An example the book gives here is, did you know that your popcorn has 20 grams of fat? Alright, but what is 20 grams of fat? What does that look like? As opposed to using sensory language, which the book recommends here, did you know your popcorn has more fat than a bacon and eggs dinner, a Big Mac, and fries and a steak dinner, with all the trimmings combined? Now that is understandable. We can see it. How much we are eating when we eat 20 grams of fat. In terms of our evaluations, clear-cut examples are what makes them concrete. What do you mean when you say you use the stage better? What does better exactly mean? Instead, if we can say, when you talk about the land far, far away, we can move to the far right, and you move to the far right. Your art table, the centerpiece of this speech, can be in the center. That gives a much more clear-cut idea of what we mean by stage usage, doesn't it? Another way we do this is through the use of sensory language. Dear speaker, when you stand at an angle, you create a brick wall against the audience. When you have alteration, such as big black BMW, it creates a sense of musical melody in the speech. And that is how we stay concrete. At number 4, we have credible. Can you believe what is being said? How do you support the credibility of what you are saying? The book recommends 5 ways we can do this. 1, obviously, is through statistics. But most often we don't have statistics, proof, numbers at our disposal. In these situations, we can use what is called an anti-authority. Use a reverse of an authority, a reverse of a proof. Somewhere something has gone wrong to show the adverse effects of a situation. Thirdly, be detailed. Details create the impression that something is true. Number 4 is the Sinatra test. There's a song by Frank Sinatra which has a line, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. You extend one case as a generalization. And number 5, make it testable. Is your claim something the audience can verify for themselves? Now, how do we apply all of this in our evaluations? Let's take the Sinatra test. Instead of generally saying the speaker can improve on how they use their hand gestures, pinpoint one specific place where they could change things up with their hands, and then generalize across the speech as something they can improve on.
If the speaker had a sudden transition to the conclusion, use that as an anti-authority to give your recommendation on how you can change things up. When you give a commendation, be detailed. For example, the volume in that line combined with the low pitch, the frown on his face, and the sharp eye contact recaptured what the speaker might have seen as a kid. Details. They capture more, they tell us more. They show that you've been listening. And yes, whatever recommendations we give, they should be testable. Principle number 5, emotional. Fundamentally, how do I make you care? How do I make it feel personal? There's 3 ways the book recommends we do this. The first is through association, tying it to something you love. For example, we can say overfishing causes specific bluefin tuna numbers to drop to 96%. Bad for the tuna fish, sure. We can also say overfishing of Pacific bluefin tuna will lead to the end of sushi as we know it. If you are a fan of sushi, that hits you a lot harder. Second is to sell the benefits instead of features. Tie to something you have or could have. For example, instead of saying 100 grams of muscle sauce contains 150 grams of protein, we can make it more personal by saying muscle sauce will give you biceps the size of your head. Thirdly is an appeal to identity, who you are. See, Texas had a littering problem. And who was most likely to litter? Males aged 18 to 35. So they introduced this slogan to appeal specifically to that demographic, don't mess with Texas. And suddenly, not littering became the cool thing to do. And with this, Texas saw a large drop in the amount of littering. Now, how do we make our evaluation emotional? How do we stay analytical without losing our audience and the speaker? Well, we appeal to identity. You have a knack for humor. Let's pause a little more to let the laughter spread across the audience. We associate their speech with the room. When we stick to one side of the audience, your audience here on the right could feel left out. We sell the benefits. A variation in your pace would help you engage us more powerfully. Last but never the least, we have principle number 6, stories. Stories are what allow us to experience your journey with you. And well, we remember experiences. The book gives us 3 types of plots we can use to give our content a sense of story. First up is the challenge plot, or the Lord of the Rings plot, where we have the underdog, the tale of rags to riches, through the hero using his willpower to succeed and overcome obstacles. Second, we have the connection plot, the plot we see in Shawshank Redemption, for example, where we have people who develop a relationship that bridges some sort of gap. That gap can be racial, class, ethnic, religious, demographic. And third, we have the creativity plot, the plot you see in Moneyball, for example. Stories of innovation, problem solving, and mental breakthroughs. See, if you think about it, a speech is in a way a connection plot. The speaker is trying to establish a connection with us, the audience. We can narrate that as a story in our evaluation. You use the hero's journey to give us a lens to experience the several events you had. Whatever was outstanding about this speech is the speaker being creative. It's a creativity plot. We can narrate that as a story. Notice how the speaker used 3 key ideas to discuss a difficult topic. Your recommendations, they can be a challenge plot. The speaker is here, here's where they can go, and here's how. An example for such a recommendation could be, the speaker used a drawing as a prop which served as the climax of this speech. Now, how do we allow the audience at the back to experience that climax as powerfully as the audience at the front? You issue a challenge before you give the solution. And similar to what we discussed in the principle of the unexpected, using the theme of the speaker's speech as a theme in your evaluation could also glue your evaluation better together as a single cohesive narrative, otherwise known as a story.
All right, that concludes our 6-point checklist to hopefully make our speech evaluations more memorable. If this video helped you find something new, useful, something you could apply in your own evaluations, do let me know down in the comments, and I shall see you with the next one.